Every day, without realizing it, you are shaping your life through your thoughts. Some thoughts build you, some slowly break you. The problem is not that negative thoughts exist. They always will. The real problem begins when we stop noticing them, stop questioning them, and allow them to grow without control. Just like a garden left unattended, the mind does not stay empty. It fills itself with whatever is planted and whatever is allowed to remain. Most people try to change their lives by changing their circumstances. Very few realize that real change begins much deeper, within the quiet space of their own mind. This is a story about that realization. It is about learning that discipline is not just about actions, habits, or routines. It is about the thoughts you choose to keep and the ones you choose to remove. Through the journey of Rohan, you will discover a simple but powerful truth. You don't need to control every thought. You need to care for your mind daily, because what you nurture one grows, and what you ignore takes over. Chapter 1. The boy with a restless mind. In a crowded town filled with noise, movement, and endless distractions lived a young man named Rohan. The streets were always busy, the markets always loud, and life seemed to move faster with each passing day. People rushed from one place to another, chasing goals, solving problems, and filling every moment with something to do. But for Rohan, the real noise wasn't outside. It was inside his mind. From the moment he woke up, his thoughts began racing. Before his feet even touched the ground, his mind would already be filled with questions, worries, and unfinished conversations. What if I don't do well today? What if I fail again? What are others thinking about me? These thoughts came uninvited, yet they stayed as if they belonged. At first, Rohan didn't think much of it. Everyone has thoughts, he told himself. Everyone worries sometimes. But over time, he began to notice something troubling. His thoughts didn't just pass through. They stayed, and the more they stayed, the stronger they became. A small doubt would grow into a heavy fear. A simple mistake would replay in his mind, again and again, long after the moment had passed. Even when nothing was wrong, his mind found something to worry about. It was exhausting. During the day, he tried to keep himself busy. He studied, worked, talked to friends, anything that could distract him from the constant noise inside his head. And for a while it worked. But the moment he was alone, the thoughts returned, stronger, louder, harder to ignore. At night, when the world around him slowed down, his mind seemed to speed up. He would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations, imagining worst-case scenarios, and questioning himself endlessly. "Why can't I just stop thinking?" he whispered one night. But the mind doesn't stop just because you ask it to. Days turned into weeks, and the pattern continued. There were moments when Rohan felt motivated. He would make plans, set goals, and tell himself that things would change. But those moments didn't last long. Soon enough, doubt would return. "You're not consistent. You'll give up again. This won't work." And slowly, his motivation faded. Not because he lacked ability, but because his thoughts kept pulling him back. One afternoon, while working on a simple task, Rohan made a small mistake. Nothing serious, something that could easily be fixed. But instead of correcting it and moving on, his mind reacted differently. "You always mess things up," a voice inside him said. He paused. His hands stopped moving. The task in front of him suddenly felt heavier. "I can't do this," he muttered, stepping away. It wasn't the mistake that stopped him. It was the thought that followed. And that was when something began to shift. Rohan sat down, staring at his unfinished work. For the first time, he didn't try to distract himself. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't walk away completely. He just noticed. The thought was still there. "You always mess things up." But now, instead of accepting it immediately, he questioned it. Always? The word felt too heavy, too absolute. Was it true? He thought about the times he had done things right, the tasks he had completed, the small wins he had ignored. The thought weakened slightly. It didn't disappear, but it lost some of its power. Rohan leaned back, surprised. For the first time, he realized something important. Not every thought deserves to be believed. The realization was small, almost fragile, but it was enough to make him pause and reflect. What if my problem isn't my situation? He wondered. What if it's how I think about it? The question stayed with him for the rest of the day. And that night, as he lay in bed again, the thoughts returned as they always did. But something was different. He didn't try to stop them. He watched them. One thought came, then another. Some negative, some unnecessary, some completely random. For the first time, he saw them not as truths, but as passing ideas. Uncontrolled, undisciplined, like a garden growing wild without care. Rohan closed his eyes slowly, a quiet realization forming in his mind. If I don't learn to guide my thoughts, He whispered, "They will keep guiding me." He didn't have a solution yet. He didn't know what to do next, but he had identified the problem. And sometimes that is where real change begins. Because the moment you become aware of your thoughts, you take the first step toward disciplining them. Chapter 2. The Old Gardener's Lesson. The next evening, Rohan found himself walking without a clear destination. The day had been long, his mind restless as always, and the familiar noise inside him hadn't quieted. He tried the usual distractions, work, conversation, music, but nothing stayed long enough to bring peace. So he walked, through crowded streets, past shops closing for the day, until the noise of the town slowly faded into a quieter part he rarely visited. That's when he saw it, a small garden, tucked between old stone walls, glowing softly in the golden light of sunset. It didn't stand out because it was large. It stood out because it was alive. Every plant seemed placed with care. The flowers bloomed in different colors, yet nothing looked chaotic. There was balance, order, calm. Rohan slowed his steps. Something about the place felt different. Quiet not just around him, but within him. In the center of the garden, an old man knelt on the ground, gently pulling something from the soil. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost peaceful. Rohan stepped closer. "What are you doing?" he asked. The old man looked up, his face lined with age but softened by a calm smile. "Removing weeds." Rohan glanced around. The garden looked perfect to him. "There are weeds here?" he asked, surprised. The old man chuckled softly. "Always." He held up a small plant with thin roots and rough leaves. It looked insignificant, easy to miss. "If I leave this," the gardener said, "it will grow, and not alone, it will spread." Rohan frowned. "But it's so small." The gardener nodded. "That's when it's easiest to remove." The word stayed with Rohan. He looked around again, this time more carefully. Beneath the bright flowers and healthy plants, he noticed tiny weeds hidden between them, small, almost invisible, unless you looked closely. "You don't see them at first," the gardener continued, "but they're always there, waiting." Rohan crossed his arms. "That must take a lot of work, removing them every day." The gardener smiled. "Not a lot, just a little, every day." There was something simple about the way he said it. No complaint, no burden, just a routine. Rohan sat down on a nearby stone. "I wish my mind worked like this," he said quietly. The gardener paused. "It does," he replied. Rohan looked up, confused. "No, it doesn't. My mind is messy. I can't control what I think." The gardener studied him for a moment, then reached for a small hand tool and extended it toward Rohan. "Help me," he said. Rohan hesitated. He had never done anything like this before, but something about the calm in the garden made it hard to refuse. He took the tool and knelt beside the gardener. "Start there," the old man said, pointing to a patch of soil. Rohan looked closely. At first, he saw nothing wrong, just soil and a few small plants. "I don't see anything," he said. "Look again," the gardener replied. Rohan leaned in, focusing harder. After a moment, he noticed a thin, unwanted sprout tucked between two healthy plants. "That?" he asked. The gardener nodded. Rohan carefully pushed the tool into the soil and pulled the small weed out. It came out easily, roots and all. "That was simple," he said. The gardener smiled. "Because you caught it early." They continued working. Rohan began to notice more weeds, some small, some slightly deeper, some harder to remove. Each required a little more effort, a little more attention. After a while, he wiped his hands and said, "Some of these are harder to remove." The gardener nodded. "Because they've been there longer." Rohan paused. Something about that felt familiar. "What happens if you don't remove them?" he asked. The gardener leaned back slightly, looking across the garden. "They grow, they spread. They take the space, the nutrients, the light, and slowly they weaken everything around them." Rohan looked down at the soil in front of him. His thoughts flashed back. Doubts, fears, negative beliefs that had stayed in his mind for years. "Like thoughts," he said quietly. The gardener looked at him, a knowing expression on his face. "Exactly." Silence settled between them for a moment. Then the gardener spoke again. "Your mind is no different from this garden. Thoughts will grow whether you choose them or not. Some will help you, some will harm you." Rohan listened carefully. "The question is not whether weeds will appear." The gardener continued. "The question is, will you remove them or let them take over?" Rohan stared at the small patch of soil he had just cleared. For the first time, the idea felt real. Not just something he heard, but something he understood. "But how do I remove thoughts?" he asked. The gardener smiled gently. "The same way you remove these weeds." Rohan frowned slightly. "By noticing them?" "Yes," the gardener said, "and by not letting them stay." Rohan sat back, letting the idea sink in. Noticing, Removing, daily, it sounded simple, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. As the sun dipped lower, casting longer shadows across the garden, Rohan stood up, brushing the dirt from his hands. I never thought about my mind this way, he admitted. The gardener picked up another small weed and placed it aside. Most people don't. Rohan looked around the garden one last time. It wasn't perfect, but it was cared for, and that made all the difference. Come again tomorrow, the gardener said calmly. Rohan nodded, not because he felt forced to, but because, for the first time, he felt like he had found something worth understanding. As he walked back through the quiet streets, his mind was still active but different. Not quieter, but clearer, because now he could see something he hadn't seen before. Not all thoughts deserve to stay, and maybe, just maybe, he could learn to remove them. Chapter 3, Facing the Weeds Within. The next morning felt different, not because the world had changed, but because Rohan had decided to do something he had never done before. Instead of reaching for his phone the moment he woke up, he sat still. No distractions, no noise, just himself. At first, it felt uncomfortable. His mind, used to constant stimulation, immediately began to react. Thoughts rushed in as if they had been waiting for this exact moment. What are you doing? This is a waste of time. You have things to do. Rohan shifted slightly, resisting the urge to get up. The discomfort wasn't physical, it was mental. Sitting quietly felt harder than any task he had done before. But he stayed. Just notice them, he reminded himself. A thought appeared. I'm already behind today. Normally, he would accept it instantly, letting it shape his mood. But today, he paused. Is that true? He asked silently. The thought hesitated, almost as if it had been questioned for the first time. He looked at the clock. It was early. There was still time. The thought weakened. Another one came quickly. You're not consistent. You'll stop doing this in a few days. This one felt stronger, familiar. It had been in his mind for years. Rohan felt the urge to believe it, but he paused again. Maybe, he admitted quietly, but not today. The thought didn't disappear completely, but it lost its control over him. For the first time, Rohan wasn't fighting his thoughts. He was observing them. Minutes passed slowly. Some thoughts came and went quickly. Random, harmless, easy to ignore. But others stayed longer, repeating themselves, trying to pull him in. You're not good enough. This won't work. Why even try? Each time, Rohan noticed the same pattern. The moment he believed a thought, it grew stronger. The moment he questioned it, it weakened. It was subtle, but real. After a while, he opened his eyes. Nothing dramatic had happened. His mind wasn't empty. His problems hadn't disappeared. But something had shifted. He felt a small space between himself and his thoughts. And in that space, there was choice. That day, he carried this awareness with him. While working, a mistake triggered a familiar reaction. You always mess things up. The thought appeared instantly. Rohan paused. Instead of reacting, he asked himself, is this helpful? The answer was clear. No. He corrected the mistake and continued. Later, while talking to a friend, another thought surfaced. They're judging you. He felt the usual tension rising in his chest. But this time, he noticed it. He didn't act on it. He stayed present in the conversation. The thought faded. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was exhausting. Watching his thoughts required effort. Questioning them required patience. And some thoughts were stubborn. They returned again and again, stronger each time. That evening, Rohan returned to the garden. The old gardener was there, as always, tending to the soil. I tried what you said, Rohan said, sitting down. The gardener nodded. And? It's harder than it looks, Rohan admitted. The thoughts don't stop. The gardener smiled. The weeds don't stop either. Rohan let out a small breath. Some of them come back again and again, then remove them again and again. The gardener replied calmly. Rohan looked at him. Won't that get tiring? The gardener placed a small weed aside and looked at the garden around them. It's more tiring to let them take over. Silence settled for a moment. Rohan thought about his day. The effort, the awareness, the moments he almost slipped back into old patterns. I don't feel in control yet, he said. The gardener nodded. You're not trying to control everything. You're learning to guide. There was a difference, a big one. Control meant forcing the mind to be quiet. Guidance meant choosing which thoughts to follow. Rohan looked down at his hands, remembering the small weeds he had pulled the day before. They're easier to remove when they're small, he said. The gardener smiled. Exactly. That night, Rohan sat again, just for a few minutes. He watched his thoughts, not perfectly, not consistently, but intentionally. Some thoughts he let pass, some he questioned, some he replaced, and slowly something began to happen. The noise didn't disappear, but it no longer felt overwhelming, because now he understood something powerful. His thoughts were not commands, they were options, and for the first time in his life, Rohan realized he didn't have to follow every thought that entered his mind. He could choose, and that choice was the beginning of discipline. Chapter 4. The Discipline of Daily Care. The change in Rohan's life did not arrive suddenly. There was no single moment where everything became clear, no instant transformation that silenced his mind forever. Instead, it came quietly, through repetition, through small daily decisions that no one else could see. Every morning, before the world demanded his attention, Rohan sat down for a few minutes with one simple purpose: to observe his thoughts, not to control them, not to stop them, just to notice them. Some mornings felt easy. His mind was calm, his thoughts slower, easier to watch without getting pulled in. But most mornings were not like that. Most mornings were chaotic. His mind jumped from one thought to another, restless and impatient. This isn't working. You're wasting time. You should be doing something more productive. The thoughts sounded convincing, but now Rohan recognized them. He didn't argue with them. He didn't follow them either. He simply let them pass. That was the discipline. Not perfection, not silence, but consistency. As days turned into weeks, this small habit began to shape something deeper within him. He started noticing his thoughts not just in the morning, but throughout the day. While working, while talking, even while resting. It was as if a quiet observer had awakened inside him, watching, noticing, choosing. One afternoon, Rohan found himself in a stressful situation at work. A task had gone wrong, and pressure began to build around him. In the past, this would have triggered a flood of negative thoughts. You're failing. You can't handle this. Everyone will notice. And as expected, those thoughts did appear. But this time, something was different. Rohan noticed them immediately. He paused, took a breath, and instead of reacting, he asked himself a simple question. What is useful right now? The answer was clear. Fix the problem, not the thoughts. He focused on the task in front of him, step by step. The noise in his mind didn't disappear, but it moved to the background, no longer controlling his actions. By the end of the day, the problem was solved, and more importantly, Rohan had handled it differently. That evening, he returned to the garden. The old gardener was gently watering the plants, moving slowly, carefully, giving attention to each part of the soil. You're still removing weeds, Rohan said. The gardener smiled. Every day, Rohan sat beside him. They keep coming back. They always will, the gardener replied. Rohan watched as the gardener removed a small weed growing near a healthy plant. You don't seem frustrated, Rohan said. The gardener shook his head. Why would I be? This is part of the work. Rohan leaned back slightly, letting those words settle. Part of the work? Not a problem, not a failure. Just part of it. I think I understand now, Rohan said slowly. It's not about having a perfect mind. The gardener looked at him with quiet approval. It's about taking care of it, Rohan continued. Every day. The gardener nodded. Exactly. Silence followed, but it was a peaceful silence. Rohan looked around the garden again. It still wasn't perfect. There were small weeds in places. Some leaves were uneven. Some flowers still growing. But it was alive, balanced, cared for, and that made all the difference. Over time, Rohan began to notice bigger changes, not just in how he thought, but in how he lived. He became less reactive, more focused, more present. When negative thoughts appeared, they no longer stayed as long. When challenges came, he didn't feel overwhelmed as quickly. It wasn't because life had become easier. It was because his mind had become stronger. And that strength didn't come from one big effort. It came from daily care, from choosing again and again, to notice, to question, to guide. One morning, as Rohan sat in silence, watching his thoughts rise and fall, he realized something important. His mind was still active, still unpredictable, still human, but it no longer felt like a place he was trapped in. It felt like a place he was learning to manage, a place he was shaping, just like the garden. And in that quiet moment, with thoughts passing like clouds in the sky, Rohan understood. Discipline is not about forcing change. It is about showing up every single day and doing the small work that no one else sees. Because over time, that small work becomes something powerful. A mind that listens, a mind that chooses, a mind that no longer controls you, but one you have learned to guide. Chapter 5. The Mind He Built. Time passed, but for Rohan, it no longer felt like something slipping away. It felt like something he was shaping. The practice he had once struggled to begin had now become part of his daily life. Not perfectly, not effortlessly, but consistently. Each morning, he still sat with his thoughts. Each day, he still noticed them, and each time he still made a choice, whether to follow them or to guide them. The thoughts hadn't disappeared. They still came just as they always had. Doubt still whispered, fear still appeared, old patterns still tried to return, especially in moments of stress, fatigue, or uncertainty. But something was different. They no longer stayed the same way. One evening, after a long and tiring day, Rohan sat alone in his room. His body felt heavy, his mind slightly restless again. A familiar thought surfaced. You're slipping, you're going back to how you were. For a moment, he felt the pull of it. The old habit of believing, reacting, spiraling. But instead of following it, he paused. He had been here before. He closed his eyes and took a slow breath. Is this true? He asked quietly. The thought didn't answer. It just lingered. I've had difficult days before, he continued, speaking to himself calmly. That doesn't erase everything I've built. The tension in his chest softened slightly. Another breath, another moment of awareness. The thought began to fade, not because it was forced away, but because it was no longer being fed. Rohan opened his eyes. For the first time, he realized something powerful. Progress isn't the absence of negative thoughts. It's the ability to not be controlled by them. The next day, he returned to the garden. The old gardener was there, just as always, quietly tending to the soil. The same calm movements, the same steady rhythm. Rohan sat beside him. I think I understand now, he said. The gardener didn't look up immediately. He continued his work, as if giving Rohan the space to speak. The weeds never stop growing, Rohan said, but that's not the problem. The gardener smiled faintly. The problem is when we stop taking care of the garden. The gardener nodded, finally looking at him. And what happens then? Rohan looked around. The garden was not perfect, but it was alive, balanced, and peaceful. It gets overrun, he said. And what keeps it healthy? The gardener asked. Rohan answered without hesitation. Daily care. There was no doubt in his voice anymore. No confusion, just clarity. The gardener placed his tools aside and stood up slowly. You've learned the lesson, he said. Rohan shook his head slightly. I've started learning it. The gardener smiled. That's enough. Silence settled between them one last time. But this time, it wasn't filled with questions. It was filled with understanding. From that day forward, Rohan didn't try to control every thought that entered his mind. He didn't chase perfection. He didn't expect silence. Instead, he did something far more powerful. He showed up, every day, sometimes for a few minutes, sometimes longer, but always with intention. He continued to notice, continued to question, continued to guide, and slowly, over time, he built something that couldn't be seen from the outside. A disciplined mind. A mind that didn't panic at every negative thought. A mind that didn't get lost in every fear. A mind that could pause, reflect, and choose. Life didn't stop challenging him. Difficult days still came. Unexpected problems still appeared. But now he faced them differently. With awareness, with patience, with control not over everything, but over what mattered most. His response, one evening, as he sat quietly, watching his thoughts come and go like passing clouds, a small realization settled within him. The mind is never empty, but it can be guided, and in that guidance, there is power. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady, reliable, unshakable. Rohan smiled faintly, closing his eyes for a moment of stillness. He hadn't built a perfect mind. He had built a practiced one, and that made all the difference. Your mind is speaking to you right now. Some of those thoughts are building you, and some are quietly holding you back. The difference between the life you have and the life you want is not just action. It's the thoughts you choose to follow every single day. So starting today, don't try to control everything. Don't wait for the perfect mindset. Just begin. Notice your thoughts. Question what doesn't serve you. Replace what weakens you. Repeat it daily, because discipline isn't built in one moment. It's built in small choices, made again and again. If this story made you think, take action now. Like this video, comment I control my thoughts, and subscribe for more powerful stories that build your mind. Remember, if you don't take care of your mind, something else will, and what you allow today will shape who you become tomorrow.